If people can get really lost in the facts of a conversation, almost like it's a court of law, versus sensing that someone in front of you is getting distressed and saying, you know what, let me check in with you. Are you okay? No, I'm not okay. Okay, I can see that. Can I do anything to help? You can't do anything to help. Okay, I'm just gonna stay here. I'm here if you want to talk. I can see that you're upset. This is a really difficult situation. Acknowledge it. But I think what the temptation is, when a person feels that helpless in a conversation, is to get up and leave the room.
Absolutely.
And that's when all hell breaks loose.
Dr. Ramani, what typical behaviors and communication styles tend to, I'll say, trigger negative reactions in someone with BPD?
Things that are critical, things that, I mean, obviously none of us like that. Anything that might speak to abandonment, the sense of becoming more silent, withdrawing from the conversation, storming out, or even walking out during a conversation. That's not going to work. That's going to be very unsettling for a person with borderline personality. Talking about certain topics. Like an actual topic could be triggering if it relates to trauma or abuse or something that person is feeling incredibly sensitive about. And then the other thing is it's less about content, but it's more about tone. Tone that feels dismissive, that feels demeaning, that feels condescending, that feels contemptuous. All of those may be unsettling. Now, none of us like to be criticized. That's never going to feel good. But some of us may be able to have a more meaningful conversation about being criticized versus it feeling like it's very, very personal, unchangeable. But again, most of these things, most of the communication patterns that lead to really conflictual communication with a person who has borderline personality all tend to tie back to the sense of abandonment. I'm going to lose someone. They're saying I'm not so good, so they're going to leave. It always connects back to that point, even though that's not being discussed at the moment.
So let's run through a hypothetical.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say we are spouses, mm-hmm. and you come home from work and you are venting about your stressful day at work. Mm-hmm. As your spouse, I know that I want to validate these mm-hmm. feelings. So I say things like, that sounds rough. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry you went mm-hmm. through that. Mm-hmm. Is there anything I can do? But even in those circumstances, I could trigger something inadvertently.
Yes. And I think then that's where it gets confusing for family members.
Right.
Because you might feel like I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to do. I'm saying, gosh, that sounds really rough. And instead of, maybe the other person might want to say, why don't you quit that job? You always seem to be getting into arguments at work. Things that might be actually also true, but in the past have led to even bigger arguments. And you're like, okay, I'm just going to empathize, but there may be something tiny in that person's tone that might feel patronizing. And that might be enough to set it off. Like I said, it is not one person's job to live their lives in the service of communicating exactly the way another person needs, with good intent to be empathic and present and warm and consistent. All very healthy, all very good. You've done your part. Mm-hmm. Now, it depends on how it lands. Now, it could very well be, oh my God, you just don't get it. You don't get it. You just get to stay home all day and working out of the house. Oh, that's not even a real job. So that might start becoming twist the knife, all right? So then it's on you because that might be, see, we're assuming you're completely inert in this, that maybe you are feeling sensitive about that. Maybe you're working at home because another job didn't work out for you, or someone else, you don't feel confident about that. And you'll say, how dare you say that? You see how that escalates?
Oh, yeah.
Because the person with borderline personality is not the only iceberg in the room. The other person has other history too. They may not be as sensitive to tone. They may not be as fearful of abandonment or anxious about that, but they themselves may have their own sensitivity.
That's right.
And so those can't be turned off. And I would never suggest that they be turned off. Sometimes it's just not going to be tenable or sustainable, and that becomes a different kind of a conversation. And that's where this gets, listen, in terms of keeping it real, sometimes there's not always a perfect solution. So That's the challenge here.
So if the person has made the decision to be in it and go, all right, I'm going to do everything that I can to make this work and be supportive to this individual with BPD, and they start to see the conversation escalate, is there anything they can do to bring it back down to a normal, peaceful conversation?
I think that it is staying with the emotion, watching tone of voice.
Staying with the emotion?
Staying with the emotion. So in other words, not making it about like, but I said this, and then you said this. People can get really lost in the facts of a conversation, almost like it's a court of law, versus sensing that someone ahead in front of you is getting distressed and saying, you know what, let me check in with you. Are you okay? No, I'm not okay. Okay, I can see that. Can I do anything to help? You can't do anything to help. Okay, I'm just going to stay here. I'm here if you want to talk. I can see that you're upset. This is a really difficult situation. Acknowledge it. But I think what the temptation is, when a person feels that helpless in a conversation, is to get up and leave the room.
Absolutely.
And that's when all hell breaks loose.
If you like psychology and learning about mental health and want to learn more while meeting other people who are interested, explore your membership options using the link below this video or visit medcircle.com.
That's a number one.
That's an abandonment. That's an abandonment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can sit there. Now, for some people, they'll say, I've been triggered in the past when people yelled at me. I don't want to stay there. I'll say, then don't stay there. You can get up and leave. It's now going to set up a cycle. That's why I'm saying, Kyle, this is actually almost a difficult topic.
Yeah.
Because I wish I could kind of wave a magic wand over this. But it is not like no one should be entirely emotionally controlling a relationship.
Right.
If that makes sense.
No, it does.
And that if somebody's saying, screaming and yelling at someone, the other person may try to stay calm and have lots of equanimity. But there's a point at which, listen, maybe they were shouted at as a kid. And it's a very upsetting space for them. And they're saying, I'm not doing this. And say, this is hurting me. Acknowledge the feeling. If you are going to get up and leave the room, I feel really hurt, and there might be more screaming and yelling. And then say, I'm going to step out because this doesn't feel good. Because that is setting a boundary. Don't just get up and walk away. Give it some sort of context, okay? But no, nobody should be a punching bag. There was actually an article that came out in a journal a few months ago talking about that people in family systems where there is severe borderline personality, especially untreated in the system, some of those family members have symptoms akin to post-traumatic stress disorder.
Wow.
So this is real. And that's why I'm saying sometimes really painful decisions need to be made in terms of what do I need to do for my own mental health and well-being? What do I maybe need to do for their mental health and well-being? It may be that this relationship has gone to a place that's so contentious that it's not good for either of you, and that for the person with borderline personality to be in their own appropriate treatment, for you as the person who may be trying to exit the relationship, or and I don't care if it's spouses, it could also be in a family, and that you get your treatment and then you figure that out. Again, these are really challenging conversations for people.
Yeah, I'm looking at it kind of in two broad buckets, and of course there are many buckets we could come up with, but we have on one bucket a spousal relationship, and maybe they've been together 15 years, and this is what they're going to try to figure out, and they spend almost every day with each other. And then the other bucket might be someone who sees Uncle Hank twice a year at some holidays, and that's it, and they want to pick up some techniques to use. What really got me was when you said stay with the emotion. At first, I don't think I was raised like that. I think I was raised to address the facts.
Most people were not, and that's the difficulty, because it's usually the emotion that's the issue. The facts are the facts.
The facts are the facts.
Like, you said you think I'm bad at my job. Well, you didn't. If you know you didn't say that, then you didn't say that.
Right.
You can spin around that drain all day, but say, I can, right now, I feel anxious because I don't understand what's happening, and I can see that you're having strong emotion. In fact, I would even warn people against labeling another person's emotion, saying, I can see that you're angry. Oh, hell no. You do not do that, because that now what you've done is you've pushed an emotion on them. I could say, I can see that there's some strong emotion here. Can you tell me more about how you're feeling? Now, listen, everyone out there is not a therapist. That people are going to say, I'm not a therapist. This is not my job to do this. Right. But it will definitely, like I said, what we're talking about in this session is about how do you manage in this kind of a family system, and you have to learn to do that. Is to stay with the emotion. Because, like I said, a family is not a court of law.
Right.
It's a family.
And when you say stay with that emotion, you're saying you can inquire about how they're feeling.
How they're feeling.
And you can talk about how you're feeling. You should not say how they're feeling.
No, you shouldn't label their emotion for them.
Got it.
I can see that you're sad.
That's a no-no.
No, I mean, I can see that I can see that this is, you're very emotional right now. Can you tell me how you're feeling?
Yeah.
Because you don't know if they're sad. You don't know if they're angry. You don't know if they're terrified.
Scared, irritated. Right.
But there's something respectful about it. These are things that have to be practiced. Like you said, very few people are taught this in childhood.
Yeah, that's really good. People can do that, and people will get it. Yeah, it's a obvious thing, but some of the best things that ever come out of your mouth are the obvious ones. Common sense is not always so common. When someone is in a relationship, whether it's romantic or otherwise, with someone who has the traits of BPD, they can often fall into a caretaker role instead of an encouraging role. Right. So how do we prevent that from happening, and how do we be supportive rather than enabling?
So the caretaking role is a tough one, because you can see how it's so easy to fall into, and there's something that feels so noble about it. I'm taking care of them. But it's also a power role. If I'm caretaking, I'm up here and you're down here. Not healthy.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if somebody truly needs caretaking, they have a broken hip or something like that, then yes, but only around the hip. But that there's a dangerous dynamic, and in some ways it may be serving a function for the caretaker, who kind of gets to be above it all. And for a person here, especially if that person has a borderline personality style, they may view that as a sense of being overpowered, domineered. At times it may feel incredibly comforting, but at times it may also feel very uncomfortable. A person who takes that caretaker role may also be taking it to bind their own anxiety, because then they have a function in the relationship, right? And they know what their job is. It almost helps them make sense of what can often be a very confusing circumstance. But unless your partner is truly debilitated and you actually need to be their caretaker, be very careful that that's a long-term dynamic, because it may not be healthy for either of you, unless, again, it's almost medically necessitated. And it's taxing, but it becomes a very unequal relationship.
I want to go through another hypothetical. Let's say a father has an adult child coming home from college, and the father has lived with these outbursts, since she lived in the home. Now she comes home from college, and the first thing he says is, well, how has school been? And she responds with, can't you just give me a minute to settle in before you start drilling me and grilling me on how college has been? In my worldview, I'd say, hey, you're in my house, daughter. You can't talk to me like that. But I'm sensing that would not go over well in this scenario. It's not going to go over well.
Listen, you can say it.
Right.
It ain't going to end well.
Okay. So what do I say to have it end well?
First of all, this shouldn't be a surprise when the daughter says this when she comes home from college. You set precedent for this. Yeah. So if now all of a sudden she's going to be a little miscommunicative.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So I think that you need to learn that these are patterns, and pattern implies consistency. Yeah. Even if it makes no sense to you. So if you already know this about her, when you come home and say, welcome home, let me know if there's anything I can do to help you feel comfortable, and then let her go do her thing. I think one of the things that dooms families more than almost anything else is the narratives and the expectations we have for family. I think it's the fantasy that my daughter's going to come home from college and she's going to tell me about all her new friends and all her experiences, and now we're going to grow into a friendship. And that's what people hold on to. And sometimes it goes that way and sometimes it doesn't. And if that's your narrative, if that's your hope, and that doesn't come together, there's a grieving that takes place. Like, I guess this is not going to be our story. And some people just can't let go of that. So the contention comes from, you're going to tell me what you did in college because this is the relationship I thought I was going to have with you. Maybe
Sorry.
not. Sorry. That's
Life
not
didn't
how it
go
is.
that
Life
way.
didn't go that way.
I get that. I like this that we're attacking or strategizing this from two angles. From the setting the realistic expectations, like you said. Why are you surprised that this would go any other way? And then also have those actionable strategies like watching your tone, calling out your own emotions. That is very doable for a lot of people.
Yes, it really is.
Yeah.
And realizing that it may very well be, come home, we've got all the stuff you want here, whatever, make yourself home. And then what will be interesting is that also developmentally, that daughter is now sort of coming into her own, and then you go do you. Right? And say, is there anything you need or want from me? No, you good? Okay. I'm just going to be whatever. I'm going to be in the garage doing something. I'm going to be cooking some dinner, and then let them find you.
And then just to play devil's advocate, if the father says, all right, well, I'm going to go cook. Let me know if you need anything. She goes, what? You don't care? You don't want to ask me anything about college?
And what you're describing there, Kyle, is what many people call the double bind. A double bind is when no matter what you do, you can't win. The double bind is a pattern that is frequently observed in borderline personality relationships, and actually also narcissistic personality relationships, the can't winness of it all. So once you're painted into that corner and you realize that's the case, all you can do is live your life.
All you can do is live your life.